Welcome to the Pro Aging Podcast. I'm Steve Gurney, founder of Positive Aging Community. We are excited that you can join us for our interactive discussions with pioneers and thought leaders on a wide variety of topics related to aging and longevity. In today's discussion, we chat with Dr. Sara Zeff Geber, a nationally recognized expert in life planning and solo aging. Sara is the author of the 2018 book, Essential Retirement Planning for Solo Agers. Dr. Geber was also named an influencer in aging by PBS Next Avenue. Later that year, Sara's book was selected by the Wall Street Journal as one of the best 2018 books on aging well. So let's jump into another discussion on solo aging. Well, thank you, Ellen. And now what we've all been waiting for, another discussion on solo aging. And I might add that the person that we have here today, I don't want to be over dramatic, but she wrote the book on solo aging, Essential Retirement Planning for Solo Aging. And she wrote this book in 2018 when I had never even heard the term solo aging. We've got Dr. Sara Zeff Geber, right? Did I pronounce it?
Yes.
Okay, it's horrible. I've been botching her last name all morning long, and I take full accountability of that. But Sara was named an influencer in aging by PBS Next Avenue, and her book was selected as the Wall Street Journal's one of the best books of 2018 on the topic of aging as well. Dr. Geber, I am so excited to have you today because your name has popped up on all of these solo aging discussions we have. In fact, we did a discussion on a group that created a solo aging support group, and they refer to your book as their owner's manual. So I'm delighted to have you today. Before we dive into this discussion, let's get to know you a little bit better. Tell us a little bit about your background and what led to you writing this book and other books and being such an authority in this area.
Thanks, Stephen. Before I do that, I just want to thank you for inviting me on. You have really been one of the biggest champions of solo aging and solo agers in these last couple of years. I mean, I don't think there's anyone in the country who has done more to promote solo aging from the standpoint of getting the word out to people through these webinars and through really so much of what you do. So thank you so much for doing that. I coined that term back in about 2013, and
Whoa.
then it just languished. And then when the book came out, I think that helped. But what really helped to get people talking about solo aging was the pandemic. So we're really talking about it now. But let me go back and talk about what really got me into it. I got involved in kind of the whole retirement and aging discussion right around 2010, 2011. I had been doing a lot of executive coaching and whatnot for my previous career, which was organizational development. And I noticed that so many of the people I was coaching wanted to talk more about their retirement plans than their strategic plans. So I became a retirement coach. And then I did that for a few years and loved it. And then I started hearing a lot of my people I was coaching, plus my friends, my colleagues, talking about the time they were spending taking care of their aging parents, who were then mostly in their mid to late 80s, into their 90s. And I was having a glass of wine one day with a really good friend of mine, and she had been running back and forth to the East Coast trying to get her mother settled into a life plan community. And I said, Sandy, you and I don't have kids. Who's going to do that for us? And we kind of looked at each other and knew there wasn't any real answer to that. So I started doing the research. What did other cultures do about their single and child-free members? What had been done in the past? What research was out there? And there was pretty much nothing. So I started speaking about it and writing about it, and it ultimately led to the book, which came out in 2018. So I've been beating that drum for about 10 years now.
Wow. Yeah, and I tell you what, you're right. The pandemic made us all much more aware of how unhealthy isolation and loneliness can be. But the thing I love about the solo aging term, it's unlike the other term that we're all familiar with, elder orphans, that just absolutely breaks all of our hearts. The term solo aging is empowering, and how I stumbled into it is we started having some of these discussions, and people in the chat were referring to themselves as solos. They're like, hey, I'm a solo, who's gonna do my advanced care directives or whatever, you know. And and it wasn't something that it was more like, I'm taking ownership of this. And that's, I appreciate what you're saying about me promoting this term and this dialogue, but it's actually very selfish, because in my 30 years in this field, trying to get people to plan in advance, I have found that there is nothing better, whether you're married, whether you have 10 kids or no kids, whether you're single, divorced, you know, what have you, there's no better term and topic to get people thinking about planning in a positive way than bringing up the topic of solo aging, because none of us have a crystal ball. We can all be solo agers in the future, no matter how large our family is or how connected we feel. So hats off to you. I had no idea that you were using this phrase you know, over a decade ago now.
Yeah.
So you started playing around with this, and you wrote the book. And let me share my screen here, because I love doing this with authors, is that so this is Sara's website, which I dropped on to the into chat, and you can go there, and then you can access the book on Amazon. Everybody loves Amazon because you can get it this afternoon or tomorrow. But here's the Amazon page, and I love scrolling down and taking a peek at the table of contents. And your table of contents is, we're getting there, is very robust. You got a 2-page table of contents that is divided into 4 parts. And I love how you did this. Part 1 is preparing for the future. Part 2, enjoying the second half of life. Part 3, deciding how and where to live. And part 4, ensuring comfort and care in your oldest age. Tell us a little bit about, you know, your thinking, and I imagine you've done a ton of research in this area to put such a comprehensive book on solo aging together.
Well, a lot of the research I did was simply talking to people and assessing what kind of planning people were doing and where their points of frustration came in, because they weren't able to do as good a planning, say, as their brother or sister who had adult children. But, you know, so many people don't do this kind of planning. So the layout of the book is somewhat chronological, because everybody needs to prepare for their future. I think everyone should have an advance directive. Everyone should have an estate plan that includes all your powers of attorney for finances and whatnot, as well as making sure, probably with working with a financial advisor, and you know, you can find resources that are less expensive and pro bono through your area agency on aging. There's so many resources out there for people to do this work, but making sure that you can see your way, see your path to the potential end of life, which these days most of us can probably count on at least into our 80s, if not 90s. And every day people are living into their hundreds, more and more. It's the fastest growing group, I think, are the people 100 plus. But just doing that work ahead of time, doing the financial work, doing the legal work, to set yourself up for success. And I suggest people start doing that at least by their 50s or early 60s or even before. And then put it aside and enjoy your life. And what I learned when I became a retirement coach is that there are so many different ways that people enjoy the last decade or 2 or 3 of their lives. And it may be continuing to work, it may be doing volunteer work, it may be giving back in other ways to your community, but taking a look at what the options are for you and taking advantage of those options, that will also build your social network, which is such an also very important part of the planning. Because what happens very often is when we leave the workplace, which many people still do in their late 60s or into their 70s, and decide to do something else, or in some unfortunate cases, decide to just sit home on the Barca lounger, we also lose a big part of our social network. For most people, the people they hang out with are the people from work. So developing a new social network or a rejuvenated social network is really part of the planning work. And I see it as kind of like that proverbial 3-legged stool. There's the legal, there's the financial, and there's the social. And to me, the social is probably the most important leg of that stool. So beyond that and enjoying life. And then one of the big decisions that solo agers always have to make, and it's one of the decisions that I think people get more anxiety over and spend more time thinking about and worrying about, is where do I live? So I spent a lot of time in the book talking about what are the options for where you might live later in life. And everything from the fancy retirement communities with continuing care to just simply having a housemate, living with 1 or 2 other people so you can have a little kind of self-contained community, because that's where the importance is having community. So however you can figure out a way to live where you have community is the important aspect. And then finally, the 4th part of the book is about how to plan for the end of life. Because you know what? Nobody gets out of this alive. And death is part of life, and planning for it is part of the planning process, part of the thinking process. And I would dearly love to see people be a little more accepting of the idea that we need to talk about end of life options. So that, in a nutshell, is what the book covers and the way it's laid out.
I love it. And you touched on so many things as you were walking through that dialogue. And, from there was one of our early discussions on solo aging. I swear it migrated towards making friends, because a lot of people on the discussion had not made new friends in decades. They and a few of the folks were talking about, it's like my friends are all passing away, moving away, and we had a dialogue on making friends, and it was a really wonderful dialogue. And next month we're going to talk about building your network and taking an inventory of your network, which I agree is one of the most important things. I love your suggestion about the home sharing. Just like solo aging, home sharing is a very positive trend that can reduce isolation. It can save you money. It can help you, and it's a way to connect like-minded solo agers.
Absolutely.
Okay, not surprising. The questions are coming in fast and furious here. So let's address a few of these. So Faith says, I'm 75 years old and retired. And Faith, just so you know, I like to instead try this. Instead of saying that you're retired, say that you graduated. Okay, I love it. Sometimes I say regraduation, but but Faith says, I'm 75 and retired 13 years ago because of a serious illness. Is this book appropriate for me, or is it too late? Well, I can tell you it's not too late. It's not too late for any of us, but what are your thoughts on that, Dr. Geber?
Well, Faye, you may have another 20 years ahead of you or more. So absolutely, it's appropriate for anyone at any age. Remember, this is not a financial planning book. This is a life planning book, a network planning book, a community planning book, and it's never too late to do that.
Yep. And let's see, somebody, let me get to some of these. Okay, Robert says, I'm 85. I just received an obituary for a 69-year-old friend who died as a result of a fall in her home. Falls are very dangerous for older adults, even worse for solo agers. What suggestions do you have for fall avoidance for solo agers? And Robert, I mean, we're all in the same boat, but yes, I mean, I think that solo agers feel especially vulnerable. But any thoughts on falls and things that we can do there? And also, audience members, throw in suggestions for Robert as well on this topic.
Well, there's plenty of information out there on fall prevention. I even have a checklist on my website of that you can order through my website of how to set your house up so that you have fewer things to trip over, fewer ways to not see something, better ways to light your house and all that. But I think that my biggest response to that is don't live alone. Don't live alone, because if you do fall, it's what happens next. It's important. It's how timely can you get help? So you'll find that I am not a very big fan of aging in place if it means living alone in your 3-bedroom, 2-bath suburban home somewhere on a cul-de-sac where nobody sees you except for waving to your car as you go in and out of your garage. So that for solo agers, I am a much bigger fan of having a community and a social network, some of whom you live with, as being a better solution.
Yeah, that's great, and I'm glad you bring that up, is because a lot of times folks, I mean, all the studies are out there. Everybody wants to age in place, okay? But really try to take a deep inventory on why you want to age in place. And is it the memories of the home? Is it the perceived independence of the home? Or is it that it's a safe, accessible, purposeful, empowering place for you to live? And yeah, I mean, if you want to remain in that 3-bedroom home, consider taking on a roommate. And there's websites out there like Silvernest too that are designed to help find reliable roommates for older adults that can oftentimes, in exchange for living there, get a discounted rent. You can set it to, maybe they can help you provide transportation, things of that nature. Great tips there. Okay, I saw here that somebody asked about the solo aging support group that I referenced, and this is the one that uses your book as an owner's manual. What I'm going to share in chat right now are all of the solo aging discussions that we have had, and they're recordings of it. But as you can see, the second one on the list here is the spotlight on a solo aging support group. But we had a discussion, as you had mentioned, with Eileen, the founder of the Navigating Solo Network. That was our last discussion. We talk about patient advocacy for solo agers. Discussion there with Carol Merrick on her book. Joy Laverty, she's got another great book on the topic of solo aging, the legal implications of solo aging. They're as I said, this is one of the most robust discussion topics that we have. Sydney asks, what advice do you have for solo agers who need help managing finances and healthcare, but are very low income and couldn't afford an aging life care manager or other paid services?
Well, I always like to refer people first to their area agency on aging, and that's through your county. Your county probably has a website, and you can access their senior services through that. Most places, most towns of any size also have a senior center, and they may have resources for you. So beyond that, I often talk to people about the options that lay outside of the US borders. I live in a very expensive part of California. And so when I do my live talks and people come up to me afterwards and say, I don't have a lot of money, I don't know where to live, I generally tell them, well, there is life outside of California. And maybe in your area, Steve, you have to say something like there's life outside of Washington, D.C., or there's life outside of
the Beltway, yeah.
The Beltway, right. Things are less expensive in parts of the middle of the country. So that's an option. And, there's actually thousands and thousands of people that are retiring to places in Mexico, Central America. So depending on your level of adventurousness, you might want to explore that.
Yeah, so I dropped this into chat. This is a discussion we had with the editor of International Living. And if you're not familiar with this website and this publication, it's basically, I found out in my discussion with him that was founded back in the day when there was this population of people that didn't have pensions in the United States, and they needed to live on Social Security and they couldn't afford it. And this is basically created to spotlight all the places in the world where you can live a much more affordable lifestyle, and for pennies practically on the US dollar, have around the clock care in your home that starts out as your housekeeper and your cook, and then migrates into your elder care. And you can find communities that are very friendly to expatriates and US residents. That's great. I'm glad you brought that up. On the affordability topic, folks, the discussion that we're having next month on building your network that Sara talked about earlier as well, your network of friends, church members, volunteers is so essential in providing support to us that we don't have to write a check for, but we have to intentionally plan it and map it out and share with people that this is our network and have conversations. Okay, let's see. Madhu says, I'm a solo ager. I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment. I am living closer to my child. How do I find other people with the same interests? Madhu, this is really, like I said, one of our earlier talks, talking about how do we make connections when maybe we haven't done it in a long time. I've got some thoughts on this, but Sara, any thoughts that you might share with Madhu?
Be a joiner. Join groups that share your interests, whether it's a book club or reading group or a hiking club. Look inside yourself first and think about what are you interested in at this time of your life. And I can almost assure you that there's a group of people out there somewhere near you that share your interest. You can try finding such a group on meetup.com. You can explore what groups are kind of sponsored or supported by your senior center. And also, don't ignore your place of worship. If your church or synagogue or mosque has an older adults group, which many of them do, you may want to consider joining that. But I think that most places of worship these days realize that their older members are there more for the social aspects than anything else. And you'll find a lot of groups that you might be interested in joining, and you start out with the one thing in common. You have a history of that particular religion or whatever it is, and you go off in any number of different ways. So don't overlook that. Even if you haven't been inside a place of worship in 30 years or 40 years or maybe ever, they're worth exploring. Definitely worth exploring.
Yeah, and like one of the tips that came out of that other discussion was, take an inventory of anything and everything you're interested in. Like, get out a piece of notebook paper and just write down things that you're interested in now, things you were interested in 20 years ago, and just start kind of like checking off the list. The beauty is that now we have Google, and you can get connected to people and groups so much easier than we used to when we had the phone book and we had to pick up the phone or go to the community center. The other thing, during the pandemic, I had a discussion with somebody who was a solo ager, living alone. She had just moved here, had no friends whatsoever. And man, I tell you, she linked up with Senior Planet, and she goes to 2 or 3 classes a week. And she said, it's the most bizarre thing in the world that some of my best friends, I've never met them in person, and they're this little box on the screen, but they're my yoga buddies. And I meet with them every Wednesday. And then she joked, she said, they're going to wonder why I wasn't there because I'm talking to you today. So and don't be afraid to color outside the lines, folks. It's a different world, and friendships, it is possible to have a digital friendship, but Madhu, I hope some of those ideas, and I see a bunch of people are suggesting Nextdoor. That's another great website to connect with your neighbors. Okay, let's see, Ellen, I'm going to put the International Living, I'll drop the International Living recording into chat again for you. Well, actually, and here, I'll type that in. That's about retiring abroad. And I saw somebody who said, it's like, hey, that's not for me. We're just throwing out ideas, folks, but affordability is a huge problem. And a solution that some people have taken is to go out of the country. There's risk to that, as you'll see in the discussion, but there's lots of opportunity too.
One thing I noticed in the chat is that someone I think asked, isn't it harder to make friends overseas? And I would offer to you that it's easier. For one thing, most people want to kind of immerse themselves into an English-speaking group of people. So they hang out with mostly with expats. Younger people choose to go a different way, and you generally kind of want to more hang out with locals. But you get to this point in life, probably your interest is going to be hanging out with people who speak the same language and have the same background experiences that you do. So looking into areas like the Lake Chapala area of Mexico, there are 60,000 American and Canadian expats there, 60,000. And that's just in the Ajijic area. So and that's just one place. There are so many places. It's, again, I underscore what Steve said. You may bristle at that. You may say that's not for me, and that's fine. But there are loads of people who are not going to be able to afford any kind of later life here in this country. And that's a sad fact, but it's a fact.
It is horrible. And I talk about it frequently. You've got the impoverished and you've got the wealthy, but the largest group is the caught between the cracks group. And this shifting demographic that we have, all we read about on the headlines is how there's more affluent Americans than there's ever been in history, but there's more impoverished Americans, older Americans, and there's more what I call the caught between the cracks, where you did the right things, but you're not, on either end of that spectrum where you're qualifying for all the subsidies or where you can write a check to find everything. Um, the somebody brought up, and I agree, community college classes for older adults are at a reduced rate. Also, if you've got a college near you, most states provide older adults with the ability to audit any class that they'd like for free. So look into that. And it's a great way to just meet someone. And also, the intergenerational nature of a university and a college is a wonderful place. And don't really, the other topic, one of the other topics we talk about is ageism. And a lot of times we have internal ageism that we think that, oh, that young person doesn't want to talk to me. Mita, I saw that you are in a garden club. She followed up that she's part of a garden club. There are so many young people that don't know how to garden and would love to learn how to garden. And it's just this great opportunity for the generations to connect with each other. So the and you know, something about making friends is on that previous discussion, somebody chimed in and they said, you know, as we're sort of going through life, try to make friends with people of all ages. You know, that's especially powerful when we're thinking about our future, where we might need somebody to help us. But if we can help a young person now, perhaps they can help us in the future. Let's see. Alyssa says, for those of us who are introverts, who are uncomfortable in big groups, finding the person to be the healthcare proxy, a financial power of attorney, these are challenges and it's exhausting. And Elisa, this is our number one concern of solos in these discussions. What guidance can you give folks that are trying to figure out who is going to make decisions for them if they can't make decisions for themselves?
Yeah, that is probably, that and the question of where to live are the two toughest questions that solos reckon with. And there are no easy answers to either one. I advise people to start your search for someone to be your proxy. Start within your family, if you have a family. You may or may not have adult children. They may or may not live near you, but look at nieces, look at nephews. And then if you have no family that's either available or that you would choose to do this, then you'll need to look outside of your familial circle. And to do that, you're probably going to need to be pretty strategic. I use myself as an example. I joined, when I moved to Santa Rosa from Silicon Valley about 8 years ago, one of the first things I wanted to do was to join a book club. And I found one that on Nextdoor, interestingly, that was newly forming, and I became part of it. And we're still going strong. And what I love about it is that there are all women in this case, doesn't necessarily have to be, but there are women in their 40s, there are women in their 50s, their 60s, women in their 70s. So we have a 35-year range of ages, and in 7.5 years, I've become pretty close to a lot of those women. We know each other pretty well, and I wouldn't hesitate to ask one or two of them to say stand in for me, to be on my advance directive. That person wouldn't necessarily be on the first line or the second line, but as a backup. I do have on my advance directive the son of a friend of mine. She's a lifelong friend. I know that her kids have the same values that she and I hold. And so I didn't hesitate to ask him. Now, I'm married, and I also want to make sure that people understand I don't have a crystal ball. We don't know who's going to go first. We're planning as though means, by the way, that I don't rely on him for everything, and he doesn't rely on me. We're not each other's solo network, and that's really, or social network. That's really important. I have the groups that I do things with, like my book group and my hiking buddies and various other things. I go to lunch with friends, and he has a group of men that he goes to lunch with every week. And he's an amateur musician. He's in 2 bands. So we have our life together and we have our life apart from each other. And that's so very important. So for those of you on the call that are married, I hope you're not putting all your eggs in that one basket in terms of your social network, because one day, if you don't have adult children, that will change. So just a few thoughts about that particular issue.
I love that. And you know, that's one of the things that I've found with the topic of solo aging is there are the solo agers that are out there. They maybe have been single or divorced, you know, for several years, and they're beginning to sort of think about these topics. But I tell you, the solo agers that were very dependent on their spouse, which is the sign of a good marriage, of course, but when one of the partnership passes away, how challenging that can be. And that's the other reason why these solo aging discussions are very, very helpful. Mindy says, and Mindy, I've heard this countless times, my senior center is geared to 80 and 90-year-olds. I'm 64 and they are not my peers. They are a different generation. So a couple of things here. There's 2 things here. Yes, everything that's age segregated seems to skew to a little higher age demographic, because everybody says, I'm not ready for that yet. And someday, like in my community, there's no senior center. There's a community center that happens to have classes that older adults can take, okay? But the other thing to think about is volunteering at that senior center, okay? Number one, I guarantee they need volunteers. Number 2, I guarantee that everybody there is going to be grateful and accepting to have you. And you're probably going to develop some friendships, but you can participate as a guide and a volunteer versus being a participant. And I think mentally that's a lot better for a lot of us. So that's,
You know, I would like to add too that not all senior centers are created equally. I went recently, actually it's probably been about 5 years now because it was before COVID. I went down to visit my sister in Southern California, and she lives in a suburban area. And she said, well, I know while you're visiting, I'd really like to take you over to show you my senior center. I do a lot of stuff with them. Now, she's my younger sister. I don't think she was 70 at the time, probably more like 67 or 68. And I said, really, you go to your senior center? And she said, oh yeah, I play mahjong, I go on hikes, I do all kinds of things. Well, her senior center had been very proactive and was appealing to seniors in their 60s and 70s. There were dozens of them there doing all sorts of things, from crafts to organizing trips. And I was so impressed. I actually wrote one of my blogs about it because I was just very impressed. So my point is, don't assume that your senior center doesn't serve you. And if they don't, push them to do so. Push them to appeal to younger seniors because they can. And if there are people out there that would be interested, they'll plan all kinds of things. They're wonderful creations, and they're not all created equal.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm dropping into chat an organization called the Oasis Institute. The Oasis Institute has really looked at senior centers from an innovative point of view. Here in the DC area, they're housed in department stores and really have a robust amount of classes, and it's been great for a lot of people. Okay, let's see. Let me get back to some of these questions here. Okay. Oh, we got Eileen from the Navigating Solo Network, and I am dropping some of her comment into chat there. Contact Eileen because she has a bunch of solutions that are out there for folks for Solo Agers. And let's see, Alyssa says, yes, having done what was needed to be done for each of my parents, both of whom have dementia, how can I possibly ask even a close friend to sign up for that? I wish there was someone I could line up in advance and pay and take all of that on. So well, Sarah, I jump in on these, but Elisa, one resource, you remember Ellen at the beginning of the discussion, she's an aging life care manager. One solution would be to interview a few aging life care managers. This is way in advance of you ever needing assistance, and get to know them. And one of the things that they are doing now is sort of being your on-call resource to help activate those services or volunteer support or whatever you need if you fall into, you know, the unfortunate challenge of having dementia and Alzheimer's. Sarah, any words of wisdom for Elisa? I certainly recognize what she's saying is that how could you, if you don't have like a loved one who's very close, putting that burden on somebody to care for you with Alzheimer's?
No, I think it's a very valid concern. And Steve, I like what you suggested. For those of you that may be listening to this from California or Arizona, we have such a thing as a licensed professional fiduciary, and that is something that they do as well. So I would encourage you to check into that. They have a professional society, PFAC, Professional Fiduciary Association of California, and I think actually the Arizonans participate in that. But if not, and your state doesn't do anything like that, the aging life care managers are your best resource. And again, interview several. Find one that you really resonate with. Same thing with a professional fiduciary. Keep interviewing people until you find someone that really kind of speaks your language and you feel good with, because you will be putting your life into their hands.
Okay, and I just found the website that you were referring to about the professional fiduciaries. So these individuals are people that you can hire to represent you for your advance for your medical power and your healthcare tower of attorney.
Yep.
In lieu of having somebody. Okay.
Yes.
Let me drop that into to chat there. And I think you have Sarah, if you've got one of these professionals that you feel pretty comfortable with, I would love to have them on one of our discussions, because this is a topic that really comes up on a regular basis with our discussions.
Yeah, well, we can talk about that offline a little bit. Remember, it is only for California. So
yeah, even if it's one state, just people knowing that this profession exists. I'll do a little bit more research in that area.
mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that. And Sarah, Kathleen was wondering, do you have a ballpark figure on what the costs are to hire a professional fiduciary?
I do. They charge by the hour. And what a number of people that I know have done, especially one couple that is essentially they have no children and they are the end of their line. Neither of them have any family. And they have already hired a fiduciary, and they meet with her once or twice a year, just so that she'll get to know them. You'll get to know a little bit more about their lifestyle and their values. Now, they probably won't actually put her to work on a serious basis until one of them dies, because they have each other at this point. But they're very proactive. They're planning ahead for this. And let me just say again, with regard to finances, and you asked what they charge. They charge about $150 an hour, depending on what geographic region of California even that you're in. That's the figure that I hear quoted a lot, and they may be charging a little more now. However, what they count on for their livelihood is to manage your affairs when you cannot. And that's when they really begin to rack up those hours. So they're not going to take you on unless you have enough of an estate that will be able to pay them. So this is not for people that are managing on a shoestring budget. This is for people that can pay something. You don't have to be among the upper 1%, but you have to have a few $100,000 in the bank to be able to do that.
Okay, yeah, and it sounds, well, I'm excited to have one of these professionals on and learn more about that, but I imagine you would want to be, even if it's somebody that you've vetted and trusted, still be very careful about the arrangement that you enter in with them, because it is, you could be financially vulnerable in that situation. So
you can be financially vulnerable in so many situations, but one of the things I just hate to see is people saying no to all of these things because they're afraid to trust. And at some point you have to be willing to trust. Yes, you could make a wrong decision, but go with people that your friends and other people you do trust and have known for years. Go with the people they recommend. Same thing goes for a financial advisor, anyone that's going to be talking to you and working with you with your money. But, at some point we have to say, okay, I need this in my life. I'm not going to be able to take care of myself when I'm 102. So, yeah.
And Gloria says that there are some elder law attorneys that are also providing assistance. Eileen also said that patient advocates are an excellent resource for folks in this situation. And let's see. Okay. Let me, and I'm looking at the clock. We got 5 minutes here because Sarah needs to leave. Rose, I know I kind of talked too much today. I'm trying to give, and Sarah, while I'm looking at some of these questions here, any other additional thoughts that maybe you want to plant in the seeds of our audience related to this topic that we haven't touched on today?
I think you've done a great job of setting us up to talk about pretty much everything that I would independently choose to talk about with this group. You have picked the questions that really get at the key topics. So I'm not sitting here thinking, gosh, I wish we'd get to such and such a topic, because we've really covered pretty much everything. And I know that your other experts in solo aging cover them as well. Eileen covers them, Carol covers them. We all do. I mean, it's the same stuff over and over again, but we all need that. We all need the repetition of what's important, to be reminded of what's important all the time, because we're all in this together.
And we do have people in the audience that have been to all of our previous solo aging, but a lot of times this is a new audience. So folks, that's why I've shared some of the links in chat to some of our discussions. A couple of things I saw a couple of people saying in chat, I can't save the chat on my computer. Don't worry, we cut and paste all the chat with Sarah's contact info and everything, and it's with the recording. So you'll be able to go to our website in a few hours. You'll be able to share this recording, watch this recording. I'll have it on podcast, and I'll have every single thing on chat for you there on our website. Let's see. Okay.
And Steve, I'm going to need to
cut
out here.
Okay, you've got to jump off, and let me finish with this. It says, Althea says, great presentation. I serve as healthcare power of attorney through my business, Ending Well Patient Advocacy. Please check that out. Patient advocacy is, again, another little known profession that's out there. Sarah, thanks so much. I love this topic, and our audience, you all are great. These questions really made for robust discussion that you don't find anywhere else. And everybody, will see you at the next discussion. Sarah, have a great day. Or it's still morning for you. And we'll see everybody at the next one that you decide to tune in on.
Thanks so much, Steve. Great to be with all of you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.